Two girls, daughters of a millionaire, are trapped in their home at the mercy of the rising waters. Not knowing what to do, the housemaid risks her life to save them, facing the strength of the current. With extreme courage, she takes them to safety, proving that true worth lies not in money but in sacrifice. Chapter 1. The Guardians of Truth. In the majestic Upper East Side of New York City, where sumptuous townhouses challenged gravity with their imposing architecture, stood the Middleton residence. It was a property that stood out even among the other luxurious mansions in the area, with its meticulously manicured gardens and a structure that blended classic and modern in perfect harmony. Within those high walls lived Anthony Middleton, a real estate mogul who had multiplied his fortune in recent years, his current wife, Deborah Sinclair, a woman of stunning beauty and a calculated smile, and the twin daughters from Anthony's first marriage, Valentina and Victoria, only 7 years old. The girls were identical in appearance, curly brown hair framing angelic faces with honey-colored eyes, but possessed distinct personalities that made them unique. Valentina was observant and reflective, while Victoria displayed an eloquence impressive for her age. Together they formed an inseparable duo who, even at their tender age, already showed a shrewdness that surprised the adults around them. Since Eliza, the girl's biological mother, had left for England to care for her own ailing mother, the twins had been living under the care of their father and stepmother. At first, Deborah showed affection and attention, quickly winning the heart of Anthony, who believed he had found an ideal substitute mother for his daughters. However, when the doors closed and prying eyes disappeared, Deborah's mask would fall. She turned the twins' lives into a constant test of endurance, assigning household chores incompatible with their age and treating them with a coldness that contrasted sharply with the loving behavior she displayed in Anthony's presence. "Valentina, haven't you finished organizing those books yet? And Victoria, those clothes aren't going to fold themselves," Deborah would demand while relaxing by the pool, flipping through fashion magazines. The twins would exchange silent glances, communicating through that special bond that only twins seem to possess. They obeyed without complaint, but their watchful eyes registered every suspicious action of their stepmother, every phone call made in secret, every stealthy move toward their father's office when he wasn't around. Also working at the mansion was Mrs. Joanna, a middle-aged woman who had dedicated more than 15 years of her life to the Middleton family. With sun-weathered skin and hands calloused by work, Joanna was more than just an employee. She was a constant and affectionate presence in the girls' lives since their birth. It was Joanna who dried their tears when they fell, who told them stories about the vast rural South where she came from, who baked chocolate chip cookies on rainy afternoons when the sadness of their mother's absence weighed heavily on their little chests. For Valentina and Victoria, Mrs. Joanna represented a safe harbor in the storm their lives had become since Deborah's arrival. The relationship between Joanna and Deborah was one of poorly disguised tension. The housekeeper, with her life wisdom, saw beyond the impeccable facade of the new Mrs. Middleton. She perceived the dark intentions behind the rehearsed smiles, noticed the glint of greed in her eyes when she observed Anthony's assets. "Mrs. Joanna, can you pick up the girls from school today? I need to go shopping," Deborah requested one afternoon, with her usual authoritarian tone disguised as a request. "Of course, ma'am," Joanna replied, with a politeness that concealed her distrust. "The girls are always happy when I pick them up." The seemingly innocent comment provoked a flash of irritation in Deborah's eyes, which she quickly composed. "Excellent. Just don't spoil them too much. They need to learn to be independent," she retorted, adjusting her sunglasses on her face. That afternoon, like so many others, Joanna picked up the twins from the private school they attended, and during the drive back, filled the car with stories and songs that made the girls laugh. Those moments away from the suffocating presence of their stepmother were small oases of joy in the children's routine. "Mrs. Joanna, why doesn't Deborah like us?" Victoria asked suddenly, surprising the housekeeper with her frankness. Joanna sighed, choosing her words carefully. "It's not that she doesn't like you, little one. Some people have a hard time showing affection, but she shows it to Daddy," observed Valentina with her characteristic shrewdness. "Just not to us." The housekeeper looked in the rearview mirror at the children's serious little faces and felt a pang in her heart. "Sometimes adults are complicated, girls, but you will always have your father's love. And mine too, of course." The days passed and the tension inside the mansion gradually increased Anthony, absorbed in his business and blinded by the passion he felt for Deborah, did not notice the subtle changes in his wife's behavior, nor how his daughters were becoming increasingly quiet and observant in his presence. "Daddy, can we talk?" Valentina tried one evening when Anthony arrived home from work. "Not now, Princess. Daddy is tired and has an important meeting tomorrow. Can we leave it for the weekend?" he replied, placing a distracted kiss on his daughter's forehead. The weekend came, but the conversation was once again postponed. There was always a reason, an excuse, an invisible barrier that separated Anthony from his daughters, and Deborah seemed determined to maintain that distance. It was on an ordinary Wednesday that everything began to change. Anthony had left for a business trip to Chicago, and the twins were playing in the garden when they heard raised voices coming from inside the house. Curious and a little apprehensive, they quietly approached the back door. "Do you think I don't see what's happening? That I don't notice your intentions?" It was Mrs. Joanna's voice, filled with indignation. "I don't know what you're talking about, you meddling old woman," Deborah replied, in a tone the girls had never heard before, cold and sharp as a blade. "I know very well that you have your eye on Mr. Middleton's fortune. I see how you manipulate, how you treat the girls when he's not around. A good man like him doesn't deserve this." There was a moment of tense silence, and then Deborah spoke again, now with a threatening calm. "Be careful, Joanna. People like you are easily replaceable. And believe me, if I want you to disappear from this house, Anthony won't even blink before signing your dismissal." The twins exchanged frightened looks, their hearts racing. They had never witnessed such a direct confrontation between their stepmother and the housekeeper. "I'm not afraid of you," Joanna replied with dignity. "I've known Mr. Middleton for much longer than you have, and I know that deep down he will see the truth." A dry, humorless laugh echoed through the kitchen. "You really believe that? He's completely in love with me. He would do anything I asked. And when I finally get what I want, neither you nor those little brats will be around to get in the way." Valentina covered her mouth to stifle a sob, while Victoria squeezed her hand, offering silent support. Deborah's words were like daggers, confirming the fears that had been accumulating in their small hearts. In the days that followed, the girls watched their stepmother's every move with redoubled attention. They noticed her secret phone calls, her furtive glances at their father's financial documents, her sudden interest in details of Anthony's business that had previously seemed to bore her. Something was about to happen, they could feel it. The air inside the mansion seemed charged with electricity, like the sky before a devastating storm. The storm finally arrived on a Friday night, when Anthony returned from his trip. The girls were in their room, supposedly asleep, when they heard Deborah's scream echoing through the mansion's corridors. "Anthony, come quick, the safe has the money. It's gone." The sound of hurried footsteps followed, and then their father's deep voice. "What do you mean, gone? Who was in the office?" "I don't know. I went to get that document you asked for, and noticed the safe was ajar. When I looked inside, oh, Anthony, all that money you set aside for the new development, it's disappeared." Valentina and Victoria looked at each other, a shiver running down their spines. Something told them this was not just a robbery, it was the beginning of something much bigger, much darker, and somehow they knew they needed to be prepared for what was to come. Chapter 2. Shadows and Suspicions. The next morning dawned grey over New York City, as if the sky itself shared the tension that hung over the Middleton mansion. The twins woke early but remained silent in their beds, listening intently to the sounds coming from downstairs. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, the unmistakable noise of drawers being opened and slammed shut. Something serious was happening. Valentina was the first to get up, closely followed by Victoria. Both were still in their teddy bear pajamas when they tiptoed down the marble staircase, careful not to be noticed. They hid behind a huge fern that decorated the entrance hall, from where they could observe what was happening in the main living room. The scene they found would forever be etched in their memories. Their father, Anthony, paced back and forth, running his hands through his graying hair in a gesture of clear agitation. Deborah sat on the Italian leather sofa, apparently distraught, but the girls noticed the calculating glint in her eyes as she followed her husband's every move. And, to the children's surprise, two uniformed police officers were talking in low voices near the window. Even more shocking was seeing Mrs. Joanna sitting in a separate chair, her face streaked with tears and an expression of absolute despair. Beside her, an open handbag displayed stacks of cash, the same cash, the twins presumed, that had been reported missing from the safe. "Joanna, how could you do this?" Anthony's voice echoed through the room, laden with disappointment. 15 years. 15 years of trust, thrown away just like that. I swear, Mr. Middleton, I didn't take this money, Joanna replied between sobs. Someone put this in my bag. I never— The evidence is clear, one of the police officers interrupted, consulting his notes. The money was found in your bag. The security cameras show you entering the office around the time the theft would have occurred. And according to Mrs. Middleton, you were in need of money to help a sick relative down south. Valentina and Victoria exchanged alarmed glances. How could this be? Mrs. Joanna would never do something like this. The woman who told them stories, who dried their tears, who always spoke of honesty and integrity, a thief? It was impossible to believe. You can take her away, Anthony said finally, turning his back as if he could no longer bear to look at the housekeeper. My lawyer will be in touch to formalize the complaint. As the officers began to lead Joanna out, the woman looked around as if searching for something or someone to save her. It was then that her eyes met the twins, hidden behind the plant. A silent look, filled with pleading and something more, a mute request for them to believe in her innocence. Deborah rose from the sofa with the studied elegance of a consummate actress and approached Anthony, wrapping him in an embrace that seemed sincere and comforting. Darling, I know how difficult this must be for you. To trust someone for so long and then to find out— I don't want to talk about it right now, he cut in, gently pulling away. I need to reorganize some documents in the office before this afternoon's meeting. Can you check if the girls are awake yet? They shouldn't know what happened. They're too young to understand. Of course, my love, I'll take care of the children. You focus on your business, Deborah replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The twins didn't wait any longer. They quickly climbed the stairs, avoiding the creaky steps, and returned to their room, throwing themselves onto their beds seconds before they heard footsteps approaching in the hallway. Girls? Are you awake? Deborah's honeyed voice sounded from the other side of the door before she opened it. Valentina and Victoria pretended to wake up just then, rubbing their eyes and yawning convincingly. Good morning, Deborah, Victoria murmured, sitting up in bed. Good morning, darlings, the stepmother replied with a smile that didn't match the coldness in her eyes. We have a busy day ahead. Your father is very busy today, so don't bother him, okay? Now get ready for breakfast. And oh, you won't be seeing Mrs. Joanna around here anymore. She had to leave. Why? Asked Valentina, unable to contain her curiosity. Deborah's smile faltered for an instant. Sometimes people aren't who we think they are. Joanna did something very bad and is now facing the consequences. But don't worry, I'm already arranging for someone else to help out here. With that, she left, closing the door behind her. As soon as her footsteps receded down the hall, the twins jumped from their beds and met in the middle of the room. She's lying, Victoria whispered, indignant. Mrs. Joanna would never do that, never. I know, Valentina agreed thoughtfully. I saw her eyes when the police took her away. It was fear but not guilt. She's innocent, I'm sure of it. What can we do? Daddy won't believe us. He only listens to Deborah now, Victoria lamented, tears welling in her eyes. Valentina hugged her sister, her mind working quickly. We have to find out the truth. We need to prove that Mrs. Joanna didn't do anything wrong. And I think I know where to start. That same afternoon, while Deborah was out shopping and Anthony was locked in a video conference in his office, the twins put their plan into action. They sneaked into the master bedroom, a luxurious space they rarely entered. Look for anything strange, Valentina instructed, already rummaging through the drawers of Deborah's vanity. Victoria headed to the walk-in closet, examining handbags and shoeboxes. What exactly are we looking for? I'm not sure. Something that proves Deborah set this all up, Valentina replied, frustrated at finding nothing in the drawers. It was then that Victoria, while searching a box at the back of the closet, let out a muffled gasp. Val, look at this. In her small hands was a cell phone. Not the latest generation smartphone Deborah used openly, but a simpler, disposable-type device. Why would she have a hidden phone? Valentina questioned, taking the device from her sister. To say things she doesn't want Daddy to know, Victoria deduced. The girls examined the phone, discovering only one number saved in the contacts under the name R. There were several exchanged messages, all in codes and abbreviations difficult for children their age to decipher, but a few words stood out. Plan, safe, money, love-struck fool. We have to show this to Daddy, Victoria exclaimed. He won't believe us, Valentina pondered. We'll need more proof, And we also need to find out who this R is that she's talking to. The twins wrote down the number on a piece of paper and returned the phone to exactly where they had found it. They left the room as silently as they had entered, their young minds already processing the information, trying to fit the pieces of this complex puzzle together. In the days that followed, Valentina and Victoria became little detectives in their own home. They watched Deborah with redoubled attention, noting her habits, her secret phone calls, the times she seemed to check something on her hidden phone when she thought no one was looking. They also discovered, through innocent conversations with the gardener, that Deborah used to receive a mysterious visitor when Anthony was traveling, a man in a red sports car who never entered through the front door, preferring the back of the property. "I think that must be R," Valentina commented, as the two organized their findings in a school notebook hidden under their mattress. "But what can we do with this information? It's still not enough proof," Victoria questioned. The answer came unexpectedly when, the following Sunday during lunch, Anthony's phone rang. The businessman answered, and his expression changed as he listened. The twins watched intently, trying to decipher what was happening. "I understand. Yes, I'll be there." "Thank you for the notice," he finally said, hanging up. "Is something wrong, darling?" Deborah asked with a concern that sounded rehearsed to the twins' sensitive ears. Anthony took a deep breath before answering. "That was from the courthouse. Joanna's preliminary hearing has been set for Tuesday. I need to be there to formalize the charges." Deborah nodded in solidarity. "So of course you have to be there. It's your duty as a citizen." "Can we go too, Daddy?" Victoria asked suddenly, surprising everyone at the table. "What? Absolutely not," Deborah responded immediately. "A courtroom is no place for children. You'll stay home with me." But Valentina, sensing an opportunity, insisted, "Please, Daddy, we miss Mrs. Joanna. We just want to see her one more time and understand what's happening." Anthony looked at his daughters with a mixture of confusion and tenderness. It was rare to see them show so much interest in anything lately. "I don't know if that's a good idea, girls. It can be a heavy environment for you." "Please," the two begged in unison, using the pleading look that always worked on their father. After a moment of hesitation, Anthony relented. "All right, you can go, but you will sit quietly next to me and we'll come home as soon as it's over." Deborah's face contorted into a poorly disguised expression of displeasure, but she quickly composed herself. "If you think it's for the best, darling, I'm just thinking of the girls' well-being. It will be good for them to understand that actions have consequences," Anthony replied, turning his focus back to his meal. The twins exchanged a knowing look under the table. This would be their chance, perhaps their only one, to help Mrs. Joanna, but they would need to be very brave and smart to face what lay ahead. That night, as they prepared for bed, Valentina shared her thoughts with her sister. "Victoria, we need to be ready for Tuesday. It will be our only chance to tell what we know. But what if no one believes us? We're just kids. That's why we need to be smarter than them. We'll bring the notebook with our notes, and maybe we can get Deborah's secret phone as proof." Victoria's eyes widened. "That would be too risky." "It's the only way," Valentina insisted. "For Mrs. Joanna. She always took care of us. Now it's our turn to take care of her." The two sealed their pact with a tight hug, their little hearts racing with a mixture of fear and determination. Tuesday was fast approaching, and with it, the decisive moment that would forever change life in the Middleton mansion. Chapter 3. Courage in Little Hearts. Tuesday dawned with an intensely blue sky over New York City, contrasting with the tension that dominated the Middleton mansion. Valentina woke even before the alarm clock rang, her heart pounding with anxiety for what was to come. Beside her, Victoria also woke as if they shared not only identical DNA, but also the same thoughts and worries. "Are you ready?" Valentina whispered as she got out of bed. Victoria nodded, her childish face marked by a seriousness unusual for someone so young. "We're going to save Mrs. Joanna today." The two dressed with care, choosing their most formal clothes, matching navy blue dresses with black flats and hair ribbons of the same color. They wanted to look serious and respectable, like the lawyers they saw on television shows. "Don't forget the notebook," Victoria reminded, as Valentina carefully placed the small, colorful covered notebook inside her backpack. Therein lay all the notes they had taken, every clue collected, every suspicion confirmed. Breakfast passed in a tense silence. Anthony seemed lost in thought, occasionally glancing at his watch as if he wanted to speed up time and get this unpleasant commitment over with. Deborah, for her part, maintained a plastic smile as she served more juice to her husband and adjusted the napkin on her lap with studiedly delicate gestures. "Are you sure you want to take the girls, dear?" she asked for the third time since they had sat down at the table. "I can stay home with them. We could bake cookies or do something fun. They're already dressed and eager to go," Anthony replied, gesturing with his head toward the impeccably dressed twins. "Besides, it will be quick. It's just a preliminary hearing." Deborah pursed her lips for a moment, a flash of irritation crossing her gaze, but she quickly regained her composure. "As you wish, my love. I'm just thinking of their well-being." "We want to go, Daddy," Valentina stated with a conviction that surprised even her sister. "Then it's settled," Anthony concluded, rising from the table. "The driver should be waiting, shall we?" The drive to the New York County Criminal Courthouse was silent. The twins watched the city's buildings flash by through the window of the luxury car, each lost in her own thoughts and fears. What if they couldn't help Mrs. Joanna? What if no one believed them? What if Deborah found out what they were plotting? The imposing courthouse complex loomed before them, a modern construction of concrete and glass that seemed to intimidate even the bravest. Valentina felt Victoria's hand squeeze hers as they got out of the car, a silent gesture of mutual support. Anthony led them through the bustling corridors, where lawyers in suits carrying briefcases hurried past. Staff carried stacks of files, and people of all kinds waited their turn in long lines. The twins stayed close to each other, their attentive eyes taking in every detail of this new and frightening world. "Mr. Middleton, this way," called a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit and graying hair. "I'm Mr. Morris Albright, the prosecutor assigned to the case. The hearing will begin in 20 minutes. Anthony greeted the prosecutor with a firm handshake. "These are my daughters, Valentina and Victoria. I hope there's no problem in bringing them." Mr. Albright looked at the girls with curiosity. "It's not common, but there's no legal impediment, as long as they remain silent during the session." The twins nodded solemnly, promising with their eyes what their mouths did not say, that they would be the best-behaved children in that courtroom. What the prosecutor couldn't imagine was the storm of determination churning behind those innocent gazes. They were led to a waiting room, where Anthony spoke in a low voice with the prosecutor about the case details. The twins sat on a nearby bench, discreetly observing the people coming and going. It was then that they saw her, Mrs. Joanna, escorted by a female police officer, walking with her head down the corridor. The housekeeper seemed to have aged years in just a few days. Her face, normally cheerful and lively, was now gaunt and marked by deep, dark circles. Her hands, always nimble when baking cakes and tending to childhood scrapes, now trembled slightly as she held a small plastic bag with her belongings. When Joanna looked up and saw the twins, her face briefly lit up. A sad smile formed on her lips, and she gave a small nod before being led into the courtroom. "Valentina, Victoria, come on. It's time," Anthony called, interrupting the moment. The courtroom was smaller than the twins had imagined, with only a few rows of wooden benches, a raised bench where the judge would sit, and smaller tables for the prosecution and defense. Anthony guided them to a seat in the front row, while he himself went to stand beside the prosecutor. On the other side of the room, Joanna sat next to a young man with glasses and disheveled hair, likely her public defender. She looked small and helpless in that formal setting, surrounded by people who believed in her guilt. "What are we going to do?" Victoria whispered, squeezing her sister's hand tightly. "Wait for the right moment," Valentina replied, her eyes fixed on Mrs. Joanna. The hearing began with the entrance of the judge, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, who greeted everyone formally before starting the proceedings. The prosecutor stood and presented the accusation, detailing how Joanna had allegedly betrayed her employer's trust by stealing a significant sum of money intended for an important business deal. Anthony was called to testify, recounting how he had trusted Joanna for years and how betrayed he felt. The twins watched their father with a mixture of sadness and frustration, wishing he could see beyond appearances and realize the trap they had all fallen into. When it was Joanna's turn to speak, she stood with dignity, despite the evident exhaustion on her face. "Your Honor, I never took that money," she declared, her voice choked with emotion. "I worked honestly for the Middleton family for 15 years. I saw those girls being born, growing up. I would never do anything to hurt them or harm Mr. Middleton, who has always treated me with respect." "Then how do you explain the money found in your bag?" the judge questioned. Joanna shook her head, desolate. I don't know how that money got there. I only know I'm not the one who put it there. The judge frowned, clearly skeptical. And what about the security camera footage that shows you entering the office at the time the theft occurred? I did enter the office that day, yes, Joanna admitted, to clean as I always do on Fridays. But I didn't open the safe, nor did I take anything that wasn't mine. The public defender then stood up, nervously adjusting his glasses. Your Honor, my client has no criminal record and an impeccable history of service to the Middleton family. We request that she be released on bail while awaiting trial. The prosecutor immediately objected. The accused had privileged access to the residence and could interfere with the investigation if released. Furthermore, the evidence is substantial. The money was found in her possession. She was seen at the scene of the crime, and she had a motive, as she needed funds to help a sick family member. The judge seemed to be considering the arguments when a movement in the front row caught his attention. Valentina had stood up, still holding Victoria's hand firmly. Young ladies, please sit down, the judge ordered sternly. But Valentina was not intimidated. With a courage that surprised everyone in the room, including her father, she took a step forward. Your Honor, she began, using the term she had learned from watching television series, we have something important to say. The judge, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected interruption from a child, looked at Anthony, who seemed as surprised as everyone else. Mr. Middleton, are these your daughters? The magistrate asked. Anthony nodded, unable to articulate a word in the face of the unusual situation. Girls, you cannot interrupt a hearing. You need to sit down and be quiet, the judge explained in a gentler tone. It was then that Victoria also stood up, positioning herself next to her sister. With perfect synchrony, the two declared in unison, their clear voices echoing through the room. Don't say anything, Mrs. Joanna. We'll be your lawyers. A stunned silence fell over the room. The judge blinked several times, as if trying to process what he had just heard. The prosecutor let out a nervous laugh. The public defender looked at the girls with curiosity. And Anthony. Anthony watched his daughters as if seeing them for the first time. This is a formal hearing, not a game, the judge warned, recovering from the initial shock. We're not playing, Your Honor, Valentina replied, with a seriousness surprising for her 7 years. Mrs. Joanna is innocent, and we can prove it. Valentina, Victoria, sit down immediately, Anthony ordered, standing up and approaching his daughters, but the twins stood their ground. Daddy, please listen to us, Victoria pleaded. Deborah set this all up. She wants to take your money and is using Mrs. Joanna to do it. Anthony's face twisted into a mixture of embarrassment and confusion. Girls, this is absurd. You don't know what you're talking about. Yes, we do, Valentina insisted, taking the notebook from her backpack. We saw things, we heard conversations. Deborah has a secret phone hidden at the back of her closet, with messages to someone named R, talking about a plan to take your money. The judge, who was observing the scene with growing interest, gestured to the bailiff. Mr. Middleton, please control your daughters, or I will have to ask them to leave the courtroom. We're telling the truth, Victoria exclaimed, tears in her eyes. Please believe us. Mrs. Joanna would never steal anything. She taught us to always tell the truth, to always do what's right. There was something in the sincerity of those childish voices, in the conviction in their eyes, that made everyone in the room stop and listen. Even the judge, accustomed to dealing with the most experienced manipulators, seemed touched by the authenticity of their plea. Your Honor, said Valentina, approaching the bench with determined steps, if you let us show you what we've discovered, you'll understand that we are telling the truth. The magistrate hesitated, his gaze shifting between the determined twins, the astonished father and the accused, who watched everything with tear-filled eyes. It was a situation completely outside of protocol, but something in the conviction of those children made him consider it. This is a highly unusual situation, the judge commented after a moment of reflection. However, in the name of seeking the truth, I am willing to hear what these young ladies have to say. A murmur went through the room. Anthony, still visibly disturbed, sat down slowly, his eyes fixed on his daughters, as if he were truly seeing them for the first time since Deborah's arrival in their lives. The twins exchanged confident glances. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the opportunity to bring justice for someone who had always protected and loved them. With the notebook open in her hands, Valentina took a deep breath and began to reveal everything they had discovered about their stepmother's dark plans. The audience in the courtroom was completely engrossed. The little witnesses, with an articulation surprising for their age, began to unravel the web of lies that enveloped their home. And for the first time in many days, a genuine smile of hope illuminated Mrs. Joanna's tired face. Chapter 4. The Truth, Piece by Piece. A respectful silence filled the courtroom as Valentina, her colorful notebook open in her small hands, began to speak. Beside her, Victoria stood firm, occasionally adding details to her sister's narrative. Their eyes, identical in color and determination, shifted between the judge, their father, and Mrs. Joanna, who watched them with a mixture of surprise and hope. "It started when our mom had to go to England to take care of Grandma," Valentina explained, her childish voice echoing in the silent room. "Daddy met Deborah at a party, and soon she moved into our house. At first she pretended to be nice," Victoria continued, "but when Daddy wasn't looking, she treated us differently. She made us clean our room over and over, even when it was already clean, and said we were being naughty." Anthony, sitting in the front row, frowned, visibly disturbed by the revelations. He had never noticed this side of Deborah, or perhaps he had chosen not to see, blinded by the passion he felt. "But that's not why we're here," Valentina proceeded, turning a page in the notebook. "We're here because Deborah framed Mrs. Joanna. She wants to take Daddy's money." The judge leaned forward slightly, intrigued by the seriousness with which these children presented their version of the facts. "And how do you know this, young lady?" Valentina pointed to a note in the notebook. "We heard Deborah arguing with Mrs. Joanna days before the money disappeared. Mrs. Joanna said she knew Deborah only wanted Daddy's money, and Deborah threatened her. Is this true?" The judge addressed Joanna, who nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor," the housekeeper confirmed, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Sinclair and I had an argument. I noticed how she manipulated Mr. Middleton and treated the girls poorly when he wasn't around. I confronted her about it, and she threatened me, saying that if I said anything she would find a way to harm me." The prosecutor stood up, adjusting his tie in a nervous gesture. "Your Honor, this is absurd. Are we giving credence to the fantasies of two children and the desperate claims of the accused to escape the compelling evidence against her?" "They're not fantasies," Victoria protested, taking a step forward. "We have proof. We saw Deborah using her secret cell phone several times." "Secret cell phone?" the judge questioned, his curiosity clearly piqued. Valentina turned another page in the notebook, where they had drawn the phone's hiding place with surprising detail. "She has a phone she hides in a box at the back of the closet. She only uses it when Daddy isn't home, and it has messages to someone named R. The messages talk about a plan," Victoria added, "about taking the money from the safe and blaming someone." Anthony stood up abruptly, his pale face contrasting with the flush that was beginning to rise up his neck. "Is this true? Did you really see this phone?" The twins nodded in unison. "Yes, Daddy," Valentina replied. "We copied the number of this R to prove it." The determination of those children seemed to infect the room. The judge, after a moment of reflection, addressed the prosecutor and the defender. "Considering the exceptional nature of these allegations and the manner in which they were presented, I believe they deserve investigation before we proceed." "But, Your Honor, we have material evidence against the accused," the prosecutor insisted. "The money was found in her bag. The cameras show her at the scene of the crime." "That's the trick," Victoria interjected, surprising everyone with her shrewdness. "We saw Deborah messing with the computer where the camera recordings are stored. She knows how to use that stuff because she worked with computers before she met Daddy." The judge leaned even further forward, now genuinely intrigued. "And what about the money in the bag? How do you explain that?" The twins looked at each other, hesitating for the first time. "We didn't see her put the money in," Valentina admitted, "but we thought it was very strange that Mrs. Joanna, who always taught us not to take anything that isn't ours, would do something like that. And even stranger," Victoria completed, "is that on the day the money disappeared, Deborah said she was going out shopping, but she came back very quickly. And right after that she started screaming that the money was gone." The prosecutor, still disbelieving, crossed his arms. "Your Honor, with all due respect, we are allowing a formal hearing to be turned into a children's spectacle." The judge raised his hand, silencing the prosecutor. "Mr. Albright, I have witnessed many testimonies in my career, and I can assure you that the truth often comes from the most unexpected sources." Turning to the twins, he asked, "Girls, is there anything else you wish to tell us?" Valentina took a deep breath before revealing the most important piece of information. "Yes, Your Honor. Deborah is not alone in this. She has an accomplice." The word, clearly learned from some police show, caused a murmur in the room. Anthony, who seemed increasingly disturbed, approached his daughters. An accomplice? Who? He asked, his voice betraying the anguish he was beginning to feel. A man named Richard, Victoria answered. He comes to visit her when you're traveling. He arrives in a red car and enters through the back of the house. The gardener has seen him several times, Valentina added, and one time we heard her talking to him on the phone, saying that soon they would have a lot of money to enjoy together. Anthony staggered slightly, as if he had received a physical blow. The judge, sensing the seriousness of the situation, made a quick decision. "Officer," he called, addressing the policeman near the door, "I want you to immediately contact the precinct responsible for this case. Request a search warrant for Mr. Middleton's residence, specifically to locate this alleged hidden cell phone and to check security camera records." The officer nodded, leaving quickly to carry out the order. The judge then turned to the twins. "Valentina and Victoria, you have been very brave today, but I must ask, do you understand the seriousness of what you are saying? Do you understand that falsely accusing someone is a very serious matter?" The girls nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor," Valentina replied. "Mrs. Joanna always taught us to tell the truth no matter what, and we promised Grandpa before he went to heaven that we would always protect our family," Victoria completed, her eyes welling with tears. "Mrs. Joanna is part of our family, even if we don't share the same blood." Those simple yet profoundly sincere words seemed to touch everyone in the room. Even the prosecutor, previously skeptical, now seemed to consider the possibility that this extraordinary story could, in fact, be true. "Given these new elements," the judge declared, "I will suspend this hearing until an investigation into the presented allegations is conducted. The accused will remain in custody, but I order special treatment conditions, considering the possibility that she may be innocent." As the hearing was officially suspended, Anthony approached his daughters, kneeling to be at their level. His face showed a complex mix of emotions: confusion, pain, pride, and above all, deep remorse. "Why did you never tell me this before?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "We tried," Valentina replied with a wisdom beyond her years. "But you never had time to listen to us, Daddy. And when we tried to say something about Deborah, you said we were just jealous," Victoria added, holding her father's hand. Anthony hugged his daughters tightly, allowing himself for the first time in a long while to truly feel the connection with them. "Forgive me," he murmured against their hair. "Forgive me for not paying attention." On the other side of the room, Mrs. Joanna watched the scene with tears in her eyes, a trembling smile on her lips. When the officers came to take her back to detention, she made a gesture of thanks to the twins, who responded with determined smiles. The battle was not yet won, but for the first time since the nightmare began, there was a glimmer of hope. In the days that followed, the Middleton mansion became the stage for an intense police investigation. Detectives, forensic experts, and technicians scoured every corner of the property, focusing especially on the points indicated by the twins in their testimonies. Anthony, still shaken by the revelations, kept his distance from Deborah, who vehemently protested the accusations, calling them inventions of spoiled, jealous children and slander from a resentful maid. However, her demeanor began to change when investigators discovered the hidden cell phone exactly where the twins had indicated, in a shoebox at the back of the closet. "This is absurd," she screamed, as the police left the mansion carrying the device in an evidence bag. "This is an invasion of privacy. That phone is personal." Anthony, observing the scene with a new perspective, was finally beginning to see the true face of the woman he had married. "If you have nothing to hide, Deborah, why are you so upset?" "Because I'm being attacked in my own home. Because your daughters have invented lies about me, and you're believing them instead of trusting your wife." The twins watched the argument, hidden at the top of the stairs, a mixture of fear and determination on their identical faces. They knew they were on the right track, but they also understood that Deborah was dangerous when cornered. "She's going to try to run," Valentina whispered to her sister, as they watched their stepmother pace nervously around the living room. "Or destroy more evidence," Victoria agreed. "We need to keep an eye on her." That same night, when the house finally fell silent, the girls remained alert. They had agreed to take turns watching their stepmother's bedroom door, hidden behind a large ornamental plant in the hallway. It was during Valentina's watch, around 3 in the morning, that the door opened silently. Deborah emerged, already dressed in dark, practical clothing, a small suitcase in hand. Moving like a cat, she descended the stairs, careful to avoid the creaky steps. Valentina waited until her stepmother was downstairs before running to wake her sister. "Victoria, wake up! Deborah is running away," she whispered urgently, shaking her sister. Victoria woke instantly, years of twin telepathy making her understand the gravity of the situation without needing further explanation. "Let's wake up Daddy!" The two ran to Anthony's room, who was sleeping fitfully. "Daddy, Daddy, wake up!" they called in unison, shaking him. Anthony sat up in bed, disoriented. "What is it, girls?" "Deborah is running away," Valentina explained, pulling her father's hand. "She took a suitcase and is leaving the house." Without wasting time on questions, Anthony leaped out of bed and ran downstairs, closely followed by his daughters. They reached the front door just in time to see Deborah getting into a red sports car parked on the street, its engine already running. "Deborah!" Anthony shouted, advancing across the lawn. The woman turned, surprised for a moment, before her expression twisted into pure hatred. "You and your little brats ruined everything," she yelled before slamming the car door. The vehicle sped off with a screech of tires but didn't get far. Two police cars, which had been keeping a discreet watch on the street by order of the judge, blocked its path. In a matter of seconds, Deborah and the driver, whom the twins recognized as the mysterious Richard, were apprehended. "How did you know?" Anthony asked his daughters, as they watched the police lead Deborah and her accomplice to the squad cars. Valentina and Victoria looked at each other, an identical smile forming on their faces. "We didn't know, Daddy. We just thought she might try to escape, so we decided to keep watch." Anthony hugged his daughters tightly, a mixture of pride and admiration in his eyes. "You two are incredible, you know that. The smartest detectives I've ever met." The next morning, the news of Deborah and Richard's arrest was splashed across the headlines of local newspapers. The case of the Madame's heist, as it was dubbed by the press, began to reveal its true scope. The forensic analysis of the secret phone uncovered not only compromising messages about the plan to frame Joanna, but also evidence of other scams the pair had pulled on wealthy men before. Even more significant was the discovery, on Deborah's computer, of specialized video editing software used to manipulate the security camera footage. Investigators managed to recover the original recordings, which clearly showed Deborah placing the money in Joanna's bag, while the housekeeper was cleaning another room in the house. Chapter 5. The Court of Truth. The courtroom at the New York County Criminal Courthouse was packed on Thursday morning. Journalists, curious onlookers, and law students squeezed onto the wooden benches, all eager to follow the developments of the case that had captured the city's attention. At the center of this media storm were two small figures in navy blue dresses and hair ribbons, Valentina and Victoria Middleton, now known as the Little Lawyers, an affectionate nickname the press had given them. The twins sat in the front row side by side with their father, who watched them with a mixture of pride and astonishment. Anthony Middleton was still trying to process everything that had happened in the last few days, how his perfect life had been revealed as an elaborate sham, how he had been so easily manipulated, and how his 7-year-old daughters had shown more insight and courage than many adults. "Are you nervous?" he asked, leaning toward his daughters. "A little," admitted Victoria, adjusting the ribbon in her hair, "but we're happy because the truth is going to come out today." "And Mrs. Joanna will get to go home," Valentina added, with a confident smile. Across the room, Deborah Sinclair and Richard Ames, her accomplice and lover, sat with their heads bowed next to their lawyers. Deborah was no longer the dazzling, sophisticated figure she used to display in New York high society. Without her flawless makeup and designer clothes, she seemed smaller, more ordinary, almost insignificant. Occasionally, she shot furious glances in the twins' direction, as if she still couldn't believe she had been unmasked by two children. The buzz in the room subsided when Joanna was brought in by the officers. Unlike the previous hearing, she was not wearing a detention uniform, but simple, dignified civilian clothes. Her face, once marked by fear and anguish, now displayed a serenity that came from the certainty of her innocence. As she passed the twins, she gave a small nod, a silent gesture of profound gratitude. The judge's entrance silenced the room completely. The magistrate, the same one who had presided over the preliminary hearing, took his seat and adjusted his glasses before speaking. "This is an extraordinary hearing," he began, his deep voice echoing through the room. "Convened to re-evaluate the charges against Joanna Miller in light of new and substantial evidence that has emerged since the last session." The judge paused, looking directly at the twins before continuing. I want to begin by acknowledging the fundamental role of two young citizens, Valentina and Victoria Middleton, whose courage and commitment to the truth prevented a grave injustice from being committed. A murmur of approval rippled through the room, and the twins, though pleased, maintained their composure, aware of the solemnity of the moment. The investigations conducted based on the allegations of these children, the judge continued, have revealed an elaborate criminal scheme orchestrated by Deborah Sinclair and Richard Ames, aimed at defrauding Mr. Anthony Middleton and falsely incriminating Mrs. Joanna Miller. The prosecutor, Mr. Morris Albright, then stood visibly embarrassed for having initially dismissed the girl's testimony. Your Honor, on behalf of the District Attorney's Office, I would like to formally request the withdrawal of all charges against Joanna Miller and the immediate filing of charges against Deborah Sinclair and Richard Ames for the crimes of grand larceny, filing a false police report, criminal conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The judge nodded gravely. Motion granted. Joanna Miller is officially cleared of all charges, with our sincere apologies for the distress caused. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from Joanna's shoulders. Her eyes filled with tears as she absorbed the reality that her nightmare had finally ended. The twins could barely contain their emotion, squeezing each other's hands tightly. As for the accused, the magistrate continued, turning to Deborah and Richard, considering the strength of the evidence presented, including the contents of the seized cell phone, the recovered original security camera footage, and the confessions of third parties involved in the scheme, I order the continuation of their pre-trial detention until the final judgment. Deborah, who had maintained a controlled expression until then, lost her composure. This is ridiculous. I'm being condemned because of the testimony of two spoiled brats. Ma'am, the judge warned sternly, control yourself or you will be removed from the courtroom. And I must remind you that it is not the children's testimony that condemns you, but the irrefutable material evidence obtained from the investigation they inspired. Richard, who had been silent until now, leaned over to whisper something in his lawyer's ear. After a brief discussion, the lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client wishes to cooperate fully with the investigation. He is willing to provide details about this and other similar schemes in which Ms. Sinclair has been previously involved. A new murmur spread through the room. Deborah shot a withering look at Richard, who avoided her gaze, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. It was the final blow to her elaborate plot, the betrayal of her own accomplice. The offer of cooperation will be taken into consideration, the judge replied, before banging the gavel once. This hearing is adjourned. The accused will be remanded to custody, and Mrs. Miller is formally released. As the officers led Deborah and Richard out, the former couldn't resist casting one last venomous look at the twins. You'll pay for this, you little meddlers, she hissed, low enough for only the children to hear. But Valentina and Victoria were not intimidated. With perfect synchrony, they lifted their chins and held the stepmother's gaze, their eyes conveying a clear message. They were no longer afraid of her. As soon as the accused left the room, Joanna was officially released. Without hesitation, she ran to the twins, kneeling to embrace them tightly. My heroes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. How can I ever thank you for what you've done? You don't have to thank us, Mrs. Joanna, Valentina replied, her eyes shining with happiness. You always took care of us, now it was our turn to take care of you. We just want you to come home, Victoria added. No one makes chocolate chip cookies like you do. Joanna laughed through her tears, hugging them again. Anthony then approached, visibly moved. Joanna, I have no words to express how sorry I am for all of this, he said, extending his hand to help her up. I hope you can forgive me for ever doubting you. The housekeeper accepted the offered hand, rising with dignity. You were deceived, Mr. Middleton. We all were in one way or another. The important thing is that the truth came out thanks to your wonderful daughters. As they left the courthouse, they were met by a small crowd of reporters and photographers. Flashes popped from all directions, and microphones were thrust toward the twins. How did you uncover your stepmother's plan? What did it feel like to face adults in court? Do you plan to study law when you grow up? The questions came from all sides, overlapping and confusing. Anthony instinctively stepped in front of his daughters, shielding them. My daughters are just children and have been through a traumatic experience, he declared firmly. I ask for respect for their privacy at this time. But to everyone's surprise, it was Joanna who stepped forward, positioning herself beside the girls. "These children," she said, her voice filled with pride, "have taught us a lesson that many adults have forgotten. The truth and justice are always worth fighting for, no matter how difficult the path." That simple but deeply felt statement resonated in the hearts of everyone present. The reporters, touched by her words, respectfully stepped back, allowing the peculiar family to leave the courthouse with dignity. In the days that followed, the story of the little lawyers gained national attention. Newspapers, magazines, and television programs told and retold how two 7-year-old children had unraveled an elaborate criminal scheme and saved an innocent woman from wrongful imprisonment. There were even offers to turn the story into a book and a movie. But far from the spotlight and the media frenzy, in the restored privacy of the Middleton mansion, a deeper and more significant transformation was taking place. Anthony, profoundly shaken by everything that had happened, began a complete re-evaluation of his priorities. "I received an offer for us to tell your story on a national TV show," he commented during dinner, about a week after the trial. "What do you think?" Valentina and Victoria exchanged thoughtful glances before answering. "We don't want to, Daddy," Valentina finally said. "We just want to be normal kids now," Victoria added. "No cameras or interviews." Anthony nodded, understanding. "You're absolutely right. You've already been more mature and brave than you should ever have to be. From now on, I promise you'll have the normal childhood you deserve. And will you spend more time with us?" Victoria asked hopefully. "Always," Anthony assured her, with an emotional smile. "In fact, I've already cancelled 3 business trips for next month. And I'm thinking of taking an extended vacation to take Mrs. Joanna to see the ocean." The housekeeper, who had just entered the dining room with dessert, widened her eyes in surprise. "Me? To the beach with you?" "Of course," Valentina exclaimed, jumping from her chair to hug her. "You're family now, officially." "More than ever," Anthony confirmed, his gaze conveying a gratitude that words could not adequately express. Joanna, moved, placed the dessert platter on the table with trembling hands. It was a perfectly golden cheesecake, the twins' favorite dessert. "I prepared something special to celebrate our new beginning," she explained, as she served generous portions to each of them. As they savored the dessert, chatting excitedly about the plans for the beach vacation, something special hung in the air of that dining room, a sense of peace, of restored justice, of family bonds strengthened through adversity. In a moment of silence, Victoria looked at her sister with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Val, I don't think I want to be a lawyer when I grow up." Valentina laughed. "Me neither. It was too stressful." "But you were brilliant lawyers," Joanna commented warmly. "The best I could have ever wished for." "I'd rather be a storyteller," Victoria declared after a moment of reflection, "to teach people about truth and courage, like in our adventure." "And I want to be a judge," Valentina decided, "to make sure that justice always wins, even when it seems impossible." Anthony watched his daughters with a new perspective, no longer as children to be protected from all of life's difficulties, but as extraordinary beings with their own wisdom and strength. "Whatever path you choose," he said, raising his glass of juice in a toast, "I'm sure you will make a difference in the world, just as you did in Joanna's life, and in mine." The twins smiled, also raising their glasses. In that simple moment of family celebration, without spotlights or an audience beyond the welcoming walls of their home, they felt the true reward of their courage, not public recognition or fleeting fame, but the deep knowledge that they had done what was right, even when it seemed frightening and impossible. And for children of only 7, that was an invaluable life lesson, one they would carry with them forever, long after the newspapers stopped telling their story and the world moved on to the next extraordinary event. Chapter 6. Reconstruction and Revelations. 3 months had passed since the trial that had transformed the lives of the Middleton family. The New York winter was gradually giving way to spring, bringing with it not only blooming flowers in the mansion's gardens, but also a renewed sense of hope and possibility. The house, once a scene of tension and secrets, now overflowed with laughter and lively conversation. Anthony had kept his promise to reorganize his priorities. The successful businessman who once lived for his work now left the office punctually at 5 in the afternoon, declined weekend meetings, and had delegated several responsibilities to his directors to be more present in his daughters' lives. On that sunny September afternoon, Anthony watched the twins playing in the garden while savoring a coffee prepared by Joanna. The housekeeper, now officially promoted to house manager, moved with a new confidence, her serene face showing how the restoration of her dignity had positively affected her spirit. "They seem lighter, don't they?" Joanna commented, placing a basket of freshly baked cookies on the terrace table. Anthony nodded, a soft smile on his lips. They're finally having the childhood they deserve. They're back to being just children, instead of little detectives or impromptu lawyers. Joanna sat down next to him, something she would never have done before the recent events. The relationship between employer and employee had evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and the recognition of the fundamental role each played in the girls' lives. "I received a letter from Eliza yesterday," Anthony commented after a moment of contemplation. "She's returning to the States next month." Joanna raised her eyebrows, surprised. "The girl's mother? I thought she would stay in England longer, taking care of her sick mother." "Mrs. Carmen's condition has improved significantly, and well, after everything that happened here." Anthony paused, choosing his words. "Eliza thinks the girls need her now more than ever." "The little ones will be ecstatic," Joanna commented, watching the twins who were now chasing butterflies across the lawn, their laughter echoing through the garden. "They miss their mother a lot, although they try not to show it so as not to make you sad." Anthony nodded thoughtfully. His relationship with Eliza had ended years ago, when the twins were only 3. It had been an amicable divorce, motivated more by the wearing down of the relationship than by deep resentments. Both had agreed to prioritize their daughter's well-being, maintaining a cordial relationship and a functional shared custody arrangement. When Eliza's mother fell ill in England, requiring constant care, she had left with the promise to return as soon as possible, maintaining frequent contact through video calls and messages. "I think it will be good for all of us," Anthony concluded. "Especially after the trauma with Deborah. The girls need a positive and genuine female presence in their lives." Joanna smiled, understanding. "And how are you feeling about all this? It's been 3 months, but I know wounds like these take time to heal completely." Anthony took a deep breath, contemplating the question. In the first few days after Deborah's arrest, he had felt like a fool, manipulated, used, deceived in every possible way. The shame of being so easily duped, combined with the guilt of exposing his daughters to such a toxic person, had been overwhelming. "I'm better," he finally replied. "The therapist has been a great help. And understanding that I wasn't the first, nor will I be the last man to be deceived by someone I trusted, brings some comfort, as strange as that sounds." He paused, watching his daughters, who had now sat under a tree and seemed engaged in a serious conversation, their little heads close together. "But what really helped me get over it was realizing how lucky I am. My daughters showed a courage and integrity that many adults never achieve, and I have people like you, Joanna, who remained loyal even in the most difficult circumstances." Joanna felt her eyes well up with tears. "You and the girls are like family to me, Mr. Middleton. I would do it all over again if I had to." At that moment, the twins noticed the adults talking on the terrace and ran towards them, their cheeks flushed from the exercise and their eyes bright with joy. "Daddy, Mrs. Joanna, guess what we just saw?" Victoria exclaimed, throwing herself into a chair beside them. "A huge owl butterfly," Valentina completed, gesturing animatedly to illustrate the insect's size. "It was blue and black, with spots that looked like eyes on its wings. And we managed to take a picture with the phone you gave us," Victoria added, proudly showing the captured image. "We're going to research all about it later." Anthony smiled, happy to see his daughter's enthusiasm for something as simple and pure as a butterfly. It was a reminder of what childhood should be, full of discovery, wonder, and simple joys. "We have a surprise for you," he announced, exchanging a knowing look with Joanna. The twins immediately perked up, their identical eyes shining with anticipation. "What is it? What is it?" they asked in unison. "Your mother is returning to the States next month," Anthony revealed, carefully watching his daughter's reaction. For a moment, the girls were still processing the information. Then, as if a dam had broken, they burst into shouts of joy, jumping and hugging each other. "Mummy's coming back! Mummy's coming back!" they sang, dancing in circles on the terrace. "And that's not all," Anthony continued, when the initial excitement had subsided a bit. "I thought we could all take a trip together to celebrate, maybe to the beach, as we talked about before." "The Hamptons," Valentina suggested immediately. "The teacher said there are sea turtles there." "Or Martha's Vineyard," Victoria countered. "We can go by ferry and it's an adventure." We can decide that together when your mother arrives, Anthony temporized. The important thing is that it will be a family trip, all of us. Including Mrs. Joanna, right? Valentina asked, suddenly concerned. Anthony and Joanna exchanged glances, and the housekeeper smiled, moved. If you want me to, I would be honored to accompany you. Of course we want you to, Victoria affirmed, hugging her impulsively. You're part of the family now. And Mommy will love to get to know you better. That quiet afternoon marked not only another day of healing for the Middleton family, but also the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The wounds left by Deborah's betrayal were still there, but now they were scars that reminded everyone not only of the past pain, but also of the strength they had found to overcome it. As the sun began to set on the New York horizon, casting shades of gold and pink over the garden, Anthony watched his daughters playing on the lawn again, now excitedly planning the beach trip and their mother's return. There was a lightness in their movements, a spontaneity that had been temporarily stolen by the weight of the responsibilities they had prematurely assumed. They are extraordinary, Joanna commented, following Anthony's gaze. They really are, he agreed, and I promise I will never forget that again. The following week, Anthony's lawyer, Mr. Lucas Taylor, scheduled a meeting at the mansion to discuss the developments in the case against Deborah and Richard. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon, and the twins had been sent to play in the attic, a space that Joanna had recently transformed into a cozy game and reading room. They both remain in pre-trial detention, Mr. Taylor explained, while flipping through some documents in his briefcase. Richard is cooperating extensively with the authorities, which will likely earn him some sentence reduction. As for Deborah, he shook his head with a sigh. She continues to deny everything, despite the irrefutable evidence. Typical, Anthony commented, unsurprised. And what about the other cases you mentioned? Were there more victims before me? Mr. Taylor nodded gravely. At least 3 other men were targeted by the same scheme in the last 5 years. Successful businessmen, usually divorced or widowed, with young children and considerable fortunes. The modus operandi was always the same. Deborah would approach, win the trust of the target and his family, marry quickly, and then begin to manipulate situations to gain access to the assets. And Richard? What exactly was his role? Apparently they met about 7 years ago in a casino in Monaco. She was a waitress, he a compulsive gambler in debt. They formed a criminal partnership that eventually evolved into a romantic relationship. He handled the technical side, forging documents, manipulating security systems, opening offshore accounts to receive the embezzled money. Anthony shook his head, still trying to reconcile the image of the sophisticated and seemingly passionate woman he had married with the cold, calculating criminal she truly was. Any news about the assets that were diverted? He finally asked. We are in the process of tracking and recovering them, Mr. Taylor replied. With Richard's cooperation, we have identified several accounts in tax havens. Most of the money is still there, fortunately. Deborah didn't have time to transfer or spend what they had taken from you. Anthony waved his hand dismissively. The money is the least of my worries. What concerns me most is the possibility of them getting out of prison and trying some kind of retaliation against my daughters. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, understanding the concern. The chances of that are minimal, Anthony. With the volume of evidence we have and the multiple cases being connected, both will likely spend many years in prison. Furthermore, the court will certainly impose permanent protective orders in your and the girls' favor. Anthony nodded, a little more at ease. It had not been easy to explain to his daughters what had really happened with Deborah, especially given their tender age. With the help of a child psychologist, he had opted for an honest but age-appropriate approach. Deborah had done very wrong things and now had to face the consequences of her actions, just like anyone who breaks society's rules. To his surprise, the twins had understood with impressive maturity. Like when Louise in our class stole Anna's pencil and then lied saying Anna had given it to her, Victoria had asked, seeking an analogy that made sense in her childish world. Something like that, only much more serious, Anthony had replied, grateful for the simplicity with which children could sometimes process complex concepts. Now, as he concluded the meeting with his lawyer, Anthony reflected on how this traumatic experience had, paradoxically, strengthened his family. The bonds with his daughters, which had weakened during his relationship with Deborah, were now stronger than ever. He saw them not just as children to be protected, but as incredible individuals with valuable perspectives and an extraordinarily well-calibrated moral compass. After the lawyer left, Anthony went up to the attic to get the girls. He stopped at the door, watching them without them noticing his presence. They were sitting on the plush rug, surrounded by books and drawings, chatting excitedly about something that seemed very important in their private universe. "We could make a comic book about our adventure," Victoria was suggesting, gesturing enthusiastically. "Like the ones Grandma Carmen sent from England. But we have to change the people's names," Valentina pondered, always the more cautious of the two. "So we don't hurt anyone. And the ending has to be happy, with everyone together at the beach," Victoria added. Anthony smiled, moved by the innocence that, despite everything, his daughters had managed to preserve. They had faced a situation that would have broken many adults, but there they were, turning the experience into a comic book with a happy ending. "Hi, Daddy," Valentina exclaimed, finally noticing his presence. "Want to see what we're doing?" "I'd love to," he replied, entering the attic and sitting on the rug with them. The girls showed him the drawings they had made, colorful and somewhat abstract representations of the mansion, the courthouse, and all the main characters of their great adventure, as they called it. "We're making a book of our story," Victoria explained, showing the pages arranged in sequence. "So we don't forget that even little people can do big things when it's to help someone we love," Valentina completed, with a wisdom that always surprised Anthony. "It's a wonderful project," he praised, flipping through the illustrated pages. "You are talented artists. Mrs. Joanna said we can get it bound when we're finished," Victoria commented, excited. "Then we'll give a copy to Mommy when she arrives, so she knows everything that happened." Anthony felt a tightness in his chest at the thought of Eliza reading about everything her daughters had been through in her absence. He knew she would likely blame herself, even though the circumstances were beyond her control. But that was a conversation for the adults to have in private. "I'm sure she'll love it," he said, smiling at his daughters. "And what do you say we go down for some hot chocolate? Mrs. Joanna just made some." "With marshmallows?" Victoria asked hopefully. "With marshmallows and whipped cream," Anthony confirmed, laughing at the girls' delighted expression. As they descended the stairs hand in hand, Anthony felt a deep sense of gratitude. Despite all the difficulties, despite the betrayal and the pain, his family had survived and grown stronger, and much of that was due to the courage and integrity of two little warriors who, at 7 years old, had already shown more character and determination than many people develop in a lifetime. The hot chocolate frothed in colorful mugs in the kitchen, where Joanna awaited them with a welcoming smile. Outside the window, the rain continued to fall, but inside that house, now cleansed of shadows and secrets, there was warmth, security, and above all, the simple and powerful truth of family love. Chapter 7. New Beginnings, John F. Kennedy International Airport was buzzing with its usual activity on a Sunday morning. Among the crowd eagerly awaiting the arrival of the British Airways flight from London, a particularly emotional small group stood out. Anthony Middleton, impeccable in his navy blue suit, Joanna, in a floral dress and a nervous smile, and the twins, Valentina and Victoria, holding colorful handmade signs with the message, "Welcome back, Mommy," decorated with hearts and stars. "How much longer?" Victoria asked for the 5th time in the last 10 minutes, bouncing from one foot to the other, unable to contain her excitement. "The flight has already landed, Princess. Mommy just needs to go through customs and get her bags," Anthony replied, adjusting the ribbon in his daughter's hair. "She'll be here any minute now. What if she doesn't recognize us?" "It's been so long," Valentina questioned, her face expressing genuine concern. Joanna leaned down to the girl's level. "Your mother would recognize you anywhere, dear. Besides, you video chatted every week, remember?" Valentina nodded, a little more at ease. It was true that Eliza had never ceased to be present in her daughters' lives, even from a distance. The weekly video calls, the gifts sent on special occasions, the long letters she read to them when they were younger, and which in recent months they could read on their own. All of this had kept the bond between mother and daughters alive, but nothing compared to a real hug, the familiar scent, the physical presence they had missed so much. A sudden memory made Valentina smile. "Remember, Vic, when Mommy sent those shells from England? We put them to our ears and she said that way we could hear the same sea she was hearing." Victoria smiled, her eyes shining with the memory. "Yes, and we slept with the shells on our pillows for a month. Mrs. Joanna had to sew special little pockets on the pillowcases so we wouldn't hurt our faces." Joanna laughed at the memory. "Those pillowcases are still put away, I thought maybe you'd want to use them tonight for your mother's first night back." The twins looked at each other, delighted with the idea. It was exactly this kind of thoughtful gesture that made Joanna so special. The ability to turn small details into grand demonstrations of love. The electronic board indicated that passengers from the London flight were beginning to exit the restricted area. The twins immediately went on high alert, standing on their tiptoes to get a better view through the crowd. Anthony felt his heart race, not only with anticipation for the reunion of his daughters with their mother, but also for the inevitable conversation he would have with Eliza about everything that had happened in her absence. In recent days, he had wondered how she would react to learning all the details about Deborah, the trial, and the extraordinary courage of their daughters. Over the phone, he had shared only the essentials, that things hadn't worked out with his new wife, and that she was no longer part of their lives. He hadn't wanted to burden her with the more painful parts of the story while she was still caring for her sick mother. Now, however, the full truth would have to come out. There she is," Victoria suddenly shouted, pointing to a brown-haired woman who had just passed through the automatic doors, pulling a red suitcase. Eliza Middleton, still with the same radiant smile that had captivated Anthony so many years ago, immediately located her small family in the crowd. For a moment she stood still, absorbing the sight of the daughters she had missed so much. Then, as if waking from a trance, she dropped the handle of her suitcase and opened her arms, kneeling to receive the impact of the twins running towards her. "Mommy! Mommy!" the girls shouted in unison, throwing themselves into Eliza's open arms. The embrace was intense, filled with tears, laughter, and broken exclamations. Eliza covered her daughters' faces with kisses, pulling back just enough to look at them with admiration. "Look at you two. How you've grown. You're so beautiful, my little ones." "We're not so little anymore, Mommy," Victoria protested, puffing out her chest. "We did very important things while you were away." "It's true," Valentina agreed, nodding solemnly. "We helped save Mrs. Joanna." Eliza looked up, noticing for the first time the presence of the house manager, who stood slightly apart, clearly uncomfortable, intruding on such an intimate moment. With a warm smile, Eliza extended her hand to her. "You must be Joanna. My daughters have spoken so much about you in our calls. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." "The pleasure is all mine, ma'am," Joanna replied, shaking the outstretched hand. "Your daughters are true angels." "Angels with the courage of lions," Anthony added, finally approaching. For a moment, there was an awkward silence between the ex-spouses, but then in a surprising and touching gesture, Eliza briefly hugged Anthony. "It's good to see you, Anthony," she said sincerely. "And thank you for taking such good care of our girls. Believe me, they were the ones taking care of me, in a way," he replied with a wistful smile. "But that's a long story you need to hear calmly." Eliza nodded, understanding. There was something in Anthony's eyes, a vulnerability that wasn't there when she left, that indicated much had changed in her absence. "Well, we have all the time in the world to talk," she said, turning back to her daughters who were now arguing over which one would carry their mother's suitcase. "Now, what do you say we go home? I'm dying to see how everything is, and I brought presents for you." The twins' eyes lit up at the mention of presents, though they were even happier just to have their mother back. The group left the airport and headed to the car, where Eliza was surprised by another display of affection. The back seat was decorated with flowers and a welcome banner, courtesy of the girls and Joanna. "We decorated the whole car by ourselves," Victoria declared proudly. "Well, Mrs. Joanna helped a little with the hot glue gun." "A lot," Valentina corrected, always faithful to the facts. "We chose the colors and the flowers, but she did all the hard parts." "It's absolutely beautiful," Eliza praised, genuinely touched by the affection shown in that gesture. During the drive from the airport to the mansion on the Upper East Side, Eliza watched the city through the car window, noticing the changes that had occurred in her absence. New buildings, new shops, a slightly different skyline. But what impressed her most were the changes in her daughters, not just how much they had grown physically, but the maturity in their eyes, the confidence in their voices, the self-assurance in their gestures. "Mommy, are you going to stay here forever now?" Victoria asked, interrupting her thoughts. Eliza smiled, stroking her daughter's face. "Forever is a very long time, my love. But yes, I'm back to stay. I don't plan on being away from you again." "Promise?" Valentina insisted, her eyes reflecting a vulnerability that broke Eliza's heart. "I promise," she replied, extending her pinky finger to seal the commitment in the way the twins had always done since they were little. The girls intertwined their pinkies with their mothers, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. They were once again just a mother and her daughters, connected by that unique and indestructible bond that neither distance nor time could weaken. The drive back to the mansion was filled with lively chatter, with the twins vying for their mother's attention, eager to catch her up on everything she had missed, from school grades to new friends, the books they had read, and the television shows they had discovered. "And Katie from our class has a hamster that had babies, and she promised we could have one," Victoria said excitedly. "But Daddy hasn't said yes yet," Valentina added. "He says we need to prove we're responsible first." "And are you?" Eliza asked with a teasing smile. "We're the most responsible people in the world," Victoria declared indignantly. "Aren't we, Mrs. Joanna?" The house manager laughed, looking at Eliza in the rearview mirror. "They are incredibly responsible for their age, but a pet is a serious commitment. Maybe we can start with something less demanding than a hamster," Eliza suggested. "Perhaps a goldfish." The twins made identical faces of disapproval, provoking laughter from the adults. Eliza listened to everything with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at the funny stories. But she couldn't help but notice that the girls carefully avoided any mention of Deborah or the dramatic events Anthony had vaguely mentioned. It was as if a tacit agreement had been made to spare their newly arrived mother from difficult subjects, at least for that first moment. Upon arriving at the mansion, Eliza was greeted with a special lunch prepared by Joanna, a proper Southern-style fried chicken, the American dish she had missed so much in England, accompanied by all the traditional sides, and, for dessert, cheesecake, her favorite sweet. "Is all this for me?" she asked, moved by the thoughtfulness. "The girls told me all your favorite dishes," Joanna explained with a shy smile. "I wanted you to feel at home on your first day." "It's perfect," Eliza declared, sitting at the table with a daughter on each side, as if they feared she might disappear if they didn't keep her close. "Not even in the best English restaurants could I find fried chicken like ours." The lunch unfolded in a celebratory atmosphere. Even Anthony, who initially seemed tense, gradually relaxed, recalling fun moments from the past and making Eliza laugh with stories about the girls' recent antics. After dessert, the twins insisted on showing their mother every inch of the house, as if she had never lived there before. Eliza patiently followed her daughters from room to room, observing the small changes that had occurred in her absence, but mostly noticing how the spaces seemed different, seen through the eyes of her now older daughters. "And this is our new room," Victoria announced, opening the door of a room that had once been a little-used office with a flourish. Eliza entered, amazed by the transformation. The old, cold, impersonal office had given way to a magical space, with 2 beds decorated with colorful canopies, shelves filled with books, a shared study desk, and a neatly organized toy area. The walls, once a drab beige, now boasted a blue gradient reminiscent of the sky, with small hand-painted golden stars near the ceiling. "Mrs. Joanna and Daddy did it all for us," Valentina explained proudly. "It was after Deborah left." It was the first time the ex-stepmother's name had been mentioned, and a momentary silence fell over the room. Eliza realized the time had come to address the subject everyone seemed to be avoiding. "Girls," she began, sitting on one of the beds and gesturing for them to join her, "I think we need to talk about what happened while I was away." The twins exchanged apprehensive glances before sitting down, one on each side of their mother. "Daddy said we shouldn't bother you with this on your first day," Valentina confessed. "You never bother me, especially when it comes to important things," Eliza assured them, hugging them. "And I'm sure you went through some difficult times. I want to know everything so I can help you process what happened." Thus, with frequent pauses, interruptions of each other, and occasional corrections of details, the twins told their version of the story. How Deborah had initially been kind only to win over their father, how she treated them poorly when he wasn't around, how she framed Mrs. Joanna to be unjustly accused, and how they had gathered the courage to face the court and reveal the truth. Eliza listened attentively, without interrupting, only stroking her daughter's hair and occasionally wiping away a discreet tear. Her heart ached, imagining everything those little ones had faced, but at the same time, it overflowed with pride for the courage and integrity they had shown. "I am so proud of you," she said finally when the girls finished their account. "What you did took extraordinary courage. You're not mad that we didn't tell you sooner?" Victoria asked, still worried. Of course not, my love. You were sparing me from worry while I was taking care of Grandma. That shows even more how sensitive and considerate you are. The twins visibly relaxed with this assurance, and soon they were animated again, showing their mother their favorite treasures and toys. Eliza joyfully participated in the exploration of the room, but part of her mind was still processing everything she had heard. It was clear she would need a more detailed conversation with Anthony to fully understand the extent of what had happened. That opportunity arose late in the afternoon, when the girls finally succumbed to the exhaustion of their excitement and went to take a nap. Sitting on the terrace with cups of strong American coffee, Anthony finally told Eliza the whole story. The relationship with Deborah, their hasty marriage, the subtle manipulations, the treatment she gave the girls when he wasn't present, the setup against Joanna, and finally the twins' extraordinary intervention in court. They stood up, Eliza, in the middle of that courtroom, Anthony narrated, still marveling at the memory, and said in a loud, clear voice, "Don't say anything, Mrs. Joanna. We'll be your lawyers." I will never forget that moment. It was as if two little warriors had decided that injustice would not stand, even if it meant facing the entire judicial system. His face transformed as he relived the scene, a mixture of immense pride and shame for not having realized sooner what was happening right under his nose. The judge was as surprised as the rest of us, he continued, but there was something in their determination, in the purity of their intentions, that made him stop and listen. And thank God he did, because if it weren't for them, Joanna would probably be in prison for a crime she didn't commit, and I would still be blind to Deborah's manipulations. Eliza listened to everything in silence, her face alternating between expressions of horror, anger, and finally immense pride in her daughters. "I always knew they were special," she said, when Anthony finished his account, "but to face a situation like that, with so much courage and determination," her voice broke with emotion, "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. If I had known—" "You had no way of knowing," Anthony interrupted gently, "and you were taking care of your mother, who needed you. The girls understand that. Even so, it hurts me to think about what they went through." "What all of you went through," Eliza replied, turning also to Joanna, who had remained silent throughout the narrative. "I can never thank you enough for being here for them, Joanna." "The girls did much more for me than I did for them," the house manager replied humbly. "I have never seen such courage in such young children. And how are they coping with all this now?" Eliza asked, concerned. "A trauma like this can leave deep scars." "They've been doing surprisingly well," Anthony replied. "The child psychologist who sees them says that the fact that they took an active role in resolving the situation rather than being mere passive victims made all the difference in how they processed the experience. And they've turned it all into a story," Joanna added with a smile. "They're creating an illustrated book about two sisters who saved an innocent friend from an evil villainess. It's their way of making sense of everything that happened." "Can I see this book?" Eliza asked, genuinely interested. "It's in their room," Joanna replied. "I'll go get it if you like." As Joanna walked away, Eliza turned to Anthony, her eyes now more serious. "You told me in the last call that Deborah is in prison. Is there any chance she could get out and try something against the girls? We need to think about their safety." "I've already taken care of that," Anthony assured her. "We have permanent protective orders against her and her accomplice. Besides, with the amount of evidence collected and his testimony against her, it's almost certain she'll spend many years in prison." "And what about the emotional aspect? The girls seem to be handling what happened well, but they're still so young. The psychologist has been wonderful. Dr. Cecilia specializes in childhood trauma and has been helping not only the girls but all of us to process what happened. She says that transforming the experience into art, like the book they're making, is a powerful form of healing." Eliza nodded thoughtfully. "And you, Anthony? How are you dealing with all this?" The question caught him by surprise. He was so used to discussing the well-being of his daughters that he had almost forgotten to consider his own healing process. "I'm learning," he finally replied. "Learning to trust again. My instincts, the people around me. Learning to be the father my daughters deserve. Learning to see the world through more attentive eyes." "You were always a good father," Eliza assured him sincerely. "You were just distracted for a while." Anthony smiled, grateful for the kindness, though he knew he had failed in many respects. Before he could respond, Joanna returned with a colorful notebook in her hands. "Here it is," she said, handing the notebook to Eliza. It's a work in progress, but it's already taking shape. Eliza opened the notebook with reverence, aware that she was being entrusted with something very precious. The pages revealed colorful drawings and carefully written texts in the still imperfect handwriting of the twins. Valentina with more organized and precise letters, Victoria with a more fluid and artistic script. "It's incredible," Eliza murmured, flipping through the pages carefully. "They have a real talent for storytelling, and the illustrations are so expressive." "Incredible," Joanna agreed, "is how they transformed a potentially traumatic experience into something positive and creative." "They've always been like that," Eliza commented with a proud smile. "Instead of being scared, they turned the living room into a campsite with sheet tents, and we told stories by candlelight. And when Victoria broke her arm at the playground," Anthony added, "she insisted the cast be decorated to look like a warrior's armor and convinced Valentina to pretend to be her squire for weeks." The three laughed, recalling these and other examples of the twins' natural resilience, always finding beauty even in the most difficult situations. "Remember that time we had that horrible storm and lost power for 3 days? It was comforting to realize that, despite everything they had been through, that ability to turn adversity into creativity remained intact." A comfortable silence settled among the three, each lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary events they had lived through. "And now," Eliza finally asked, "what's the plan from here on out?" "Well, the most immediate thing is the beach trip I promised the girls," Anthony replied. "I was thinking of the Hamptons at the end of this month. They're excited about the idea of taking a ferry." "That sounds wonderful," Eliza agreed with a smile. "And what about school? I plan to settle back in New York now that my mother is better and my sister can take care of her in England." "The girls are doing very well at their current school," Anthony informed her. "They've made solid friendships, the teachers adore them. I think it would be good to keep them there, to preserve some stability after so many changes." "I completely agree," Eliza said. "I've already asked for information about apartments near the school. I want to make the daily logistics as easy as possible for them." Anthony seemed momentarily surprised. "So you've already decided you're going to live nearby?" "It's the most practical," Eliza explained. "It makes the girls' routine easier and allows us to share parental responsibilities more evenly. Unless you object." "No, not at all," Anthony hurried to reply. "I think it's an excellent idea. In fact, there's a new condo building 2 blocks from the school that might interest you. They have some apartments available for rent." "I'll check it out, thank you," Eliza said, genuinely grateful for the suggestion. A pause settled before she asked the question she really wanted to. "And where do I fit into this new arrangement?" The question hung in the air, laden with implications. It wasn't just about practical shared custody arrangements, but about how to rebuild a family dynamic that had been profoundly altered by recent events. "Wherever you want to fit," Anthony finally replied. "The girls need their mother. They always have. And after everything that's happened, I think we've all learned to value what really matters. Family, honesty, loyalty." Joanna, sensing the conversation was becoming increasingly personal, made a move to stand up. "I think I'll go check on the girls and prepare something light for dinner." "You don't have to leave, Joanna," Eliza said, surprising the house manager. "From what I understand, you are a fundamental part of this family now, and I'm happy about that. Happy to know my daughters had someone so dedicated and loving when I couldn't be here." Joanna's eyes filled with tears at this unexpected acknowledgement. "Thank you, ma'am, that means a lot to me." The following weeks were a period of adjustment and rediscovery. Eliza, with Anthony's help, found a spacious and bright apartment in the building he had suggested. With the proximity to the school and the mansion, the twins could easily move between the two homes, creating a routine that, though different from the conventional, perfectly met their needs. Anthony, inspired by his daughter's example of courage, continued his journey of personal transformation. He hired more managers for his companies, delegated responsibilities he once insisted on controlling personally, and established a strict policy of leaving the office at 5 in the afternoon, in time to participate in the twins' school and social life. To his surprise, his businesses not only didn't suffer from this change in approach, but seemed to thrive even more, as if the universe were rewarding him for finally putting his priorities in order. Joanna remained as the house manager of the mansion, but her role evolved significantly. She was now treated as a family friend, frequently invited to dinners at Eliza's house, and included in all important decisions related to the twins. On Sundays, a family lunch became a tradition. sometimes at the mansion, sometimes at Eliza's apartment, where everyone gathered to share the week's experiences and strengthen the bonds that united them. The promised trip to the Hamptons was an absolute success. For 7 days, the peculiar family, Anthony, Eliza, the twins, and Joanna, explored crystal-clear beaches, lush trails, and quaint seaside restaurants. The girls, free from worries, were simply children again, building sandcastles, collecting shells, and chasing waves with joyful shouts. One afternoon, while the twins slept exhaustedly after a long day of swimming, Eliza and Anthony walked along the beach, their feet sinking into the warm sand, the sun setting on the horizon in an explosion of colors. "You've changed," Eliza commented, breaking a comfortable silence. Anthony looked at her, surprised. "How so?" "You're more present, more connected," she explained. "The Anthony I knew always had his head in business, in the next meetings, the next ventures. This new Anthony seems more human," he suggested with a wistful smile. "Exactly," Eliza confirmed, returning the smile. "What happened really affected you, didn't it?" Anthony sighed deeply, watching the horizon. "It was like waking up from a long dream, you know. Suddenly I realized I was missing what really mattered. The girl's childhood, the small moments that never come back. And all for what? For more money? For more recognition in the market?" He paused, collecting his thoughts. "When I saw those 2 little girls standing up in court, so small yet so powerful, confronting an entire system to defend someone they loved, something changed in me, Eliza. It was like they slapped me across the face and said, 'Wake up, Daddy. Life is passing by and you're missing the most precious part of it.' You were always a good father," Eliza noted generously. "You were just following the model that most men follow." "But it wasn't enough," Anthony admitted. "Seeing the girls in that courtroom with more courage and integrity than many adults I know, it was a life lesson I'll never forget. They taught me what it truly means to be strong." Eliza reached out, lightly touching her ex-husband's arm in a gesture of understanding. "They have that effect on people. They remind us of what's really important." The two continued walking in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts, until Eliza spoke again. "Anthony, I've been thinking, maybe we should document the girl's story in some way. Not just the little book they're making, but something more lasting. A testament to what happened." "Like what?" he asked, intrigued. "I don't know exactly," Eliza admitted, "but I think their courage deserves to be remembered and shared. It could inspire other children, other parents. Maybe a real book or a documentary," Anthony suggested, becoming interested in the idea. "Maybe," Eliza agreed. "We need to talk to the girls, of course. See how they would feel about sharing their story with a wider audience. Come to think of it," Anthony added after a moment of reflection, "that would align perfectly with that new foundation project I'm developing." "What project?" Eliza asked, curious. "It's still in the early stages, but I'm creating a foundation to offer free legal assistance to people who can't afford a lawyer. It was directly inspired by what happened to Joanna, how she was almost unjustly convicted because she didn't have the resources for an adequate defense." "That's wonderful, Anthony," Eliza exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "An initiative like that could make a huge difference in many people's lives. And now thinking about what you suggested, maybe we could add an educational branch to the foundation, something aimed at teaching children about their rights, about justice, about the importance of standing up for the truth." Eliza's eyes shone with enthusiasm. "And we could use the girl's story as a starting point, of course with names and details changed to protect their privacy." "Exactly," Anthony agreed, growing more excited about the idea. "We could develop educational materials for schools, maybe even a series of children's books on themes like courage, truth, justice." "Anthony, that's perfect," Eliza said, stopping her walk to face him directly. "It's a way to turn a difficult experience into something positive that will benefit many other people." Anthony nodded thoughtfully. "Either way, we need to protect their privacy. They've been through enough intense experiences for such young children." "I completely agree," Eliza said. "Their well-being comes first." The two sealed the agreement with knowing smiles, the kind of silent understanding that only people who share the extraordinary adventure of raising children together can achieve. Back in New York, life gradually found a new rhythm. The twins divided their time between their father's mansion and their mother's cozy apartment, carrying drawings, books, and stories from one home to the other, building invisible bridges between their two worlds. Eliza, who had worked as a children's book editor before leaving for England, decided to resume her career. To her surprise, she was welcomed with open arms by her old publishing house, which offered her not only her previous position, but a better one, editor-in-chief of the Children's and Young Adult Division. "We're expanding our line of books on child empowerment," the publisher's director explained during the rehiring meeting. "And we want real stories that show children making a difference in the world." Eliza felt a shiver run down her spine. Was it a coincidence? Or was the universe offering her a perfect way to turn her daughter's extraordinary experience into something that could inspire other children? After carefully consulting with Anthony, and most importantly the twins themselves, Eliza began working on a special project, a series of children's books loosely based on the adventures of Valentina and Victoria. The book's protagonists, Luna and Lara, were twins who used their intelligence and courage to solve mysteries and help people in difficult situations. Victoria and Valentina actively participated in the creative process, offering suggestions for the stories and even helping to review the first drafts. For them, it was an exciting adventure to see their literary alter egos come to life on the colorful pages. "Mommy, is Luna more like me or Val?" Victoria asked one afternoon as they examined the preliminary illustrations for the first book. "They are both a little bit of each of you," Eliza replied diplomatically, "just as you two have a lot of each other, even though you are unique individuals." The answer seemed to satisfy the girls, who continued to discuss excitedly what adventures Luna and Lara should have in the next volume. The first book, Luna and Lara, the Little Detectives, was published 6 months later and became an instant success. Children all over the country identified with the brave protagonists who proved that even the little ones could make a big difference in the world. In parallel, Anthony moved forward with his legal foundation project. The official launch of the Justice for All Foundation took place in an emotional ceremony, where Joanna, now officially part of the advisory board, gave a moving speech about her experience and how the courage of 2 children had changed her life forever. "Sometimes," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "justice comes from where we least expect it. In my case, it came from 2 little girls who refused to accept an injustice being committed. May this foundation be the voice for many who, like me, would have no way to defend themselves alone." The twins, sitting in the front row between Anthony and Eliza, listened with wide eyes, just beginning to comprehend the impact their actions had had, not only on their personal lives but on a much wider circle. As the months passed, the extraordinary story of the little lawyers gradually transformed into a memory, not forgotten, but integrated into the fabric of their lives, an experience that had helped shape who they were, but did not completely define them. 6 months later, on a summer afternoon in New York, a special event was taking place in the auditorium of the twins' school. Chairs had been carefully arranged in rows, a small makeshift stage decorated with flowers, and a colorful banner announcing Children's Literary Festival, Stories That Transform. In the front row sat a proud Anthony, Eliza, and Joanna, eagerly awaiting the special presentation that was about to begin. Around them, other parents, teachers, and students chatted excitedly, creating a buzz of anticipation. A young teacher with curly hair and a warm smile took the stage and adjusted the microphone. "Good afternoon, everyone. It is with great pleasure that we begin our Children's Literary Festival. Today we have the privilege of hearing original stories created by our talented students. And to open our afternoon of literary celebration, I invite Valentina and Victoria Middleton from the 3rd grade to present their work, The Little Lawyers, a story of courage and truth." Enthusiastic applause greeted the twins, who, dressed in formal outfits that vaguely resembled miniature lawyers' robes, walked onto the stage with determined steps. Each carried a part of the handmade book they had created, a true work of children's art, with colorful pages, detailed illustrations, and a binding made with Joanna's help. "Our story," Valentina began, her voice clear and confident, "is about 2 sisters who discover that even small children can make a big difference when they fight for what is right. It's based on things that really happened," Victoria added, "but we changed the names and some details to protect the people involved." In the audience, Anthony and Eliza exchanged emotional glances, while Joanna disguised a tear with a quick movement of her hand. The twins then began to narrate their story, taking turns reading and showing the illustrations to the enchanted audience. It was a simplified and child-appropriate version of the events they had lived through, transformed into a narrative about courage, friendship, and the importance of defending the truth even when it seems scary. And then, Victoria narrated, turning another page. The girls stood before the judge even though they were so small they could barely see over his bench, and they said, "Don't say anything. We'll be your lawyers." A murmur of admiration rippled through the audience. Even transformed into a children's story, the courage of that act resonated deeply with everyone present. When they finished, they were met with a standing ovation. Some parents discreetly wiped away tears, touched by the simplicity and depth of the message conveyed by those 8-year-old children. "Any questions for our young authors?" the teacher invited, returning to the microphone. A boy the twins' age timidly raised his hand. "Is the story really based on something that happened to you?" The twins exchanged a knowing look before Victoria replied, "Let's just say we know the main characters very well." "And you weren't scared?" asked an older girl, visibly impressed. "Everyone gets scared sometimes," Valentina answered, with a wisdom surprising for her age. "But when you really love someone, the love becomes bigger than the fear." The simple but profoundly true answer provoked murmurs of approval from the audience. "And what is the main message of your story?" the teacher questioned, clearly proud of her students. The twins looked at each other again, as they always did when they wanted to be sure they were in sync. And sometimes that way can be through the hands of very small people. In the audience, Anthony, Eliza, and Joanna applauded on their feet, their hearts overflowing with pride and gratitude for these extraordinary girls who, with their innocence and courage, had taught everyone a lesson that many adults take a lifetime to learn, that the truth, however difficult it may be to face, is always the only path to true freedom. Then, in perfect unison, they replied that the truth, even when it seems impossible, always finds a way to shine. Later that night, after a family celebration at the twins' favorite restaurant, Anthony watched them playing in the living room of Eliza's apartment. They seemed so normal, so carefree, that it was almost hard to believe that the same children had faced a courtroom to defend the innocence of someone they loved. "What are you thinking about?" Eliza asked, handing him a glass of wine and sitting beside him on the sofa. "About how resilient they are," he replied, accepting the glass with a grateful smile. "About how they managed to process everything that happened and turn it into something positive, instead of letting it scar them negatively." "Children are naturally resilient," Joanna commented, joining them after tidying up the kitchen, "especially when they have love and support around them. And I think that's the biggest lesson of this whole story," Eliza added, watching her daughters fondly. "It doesn't matter how fragmented or unconventional a family is, if there is true love, children find the strength they need." "To truth and love, then," Anthony proposed, raising his glass. "And to our extraordinary daughters, who taught us the value of both." "To truth and love," Eliza and Joanna agreed, raising their glasses as well. The twins, noticing the toast, ran to join the adults. "Can we join too?" Valentina asked. "Of course," Eliza replied, pouring grape juice into 2 small glasses. "What do you want to celebrate?" The girls exchanged a look, that silent communication only they fully understood, before replying in unison, "To our family, just the way it is." The 5 of them raised their glasses, united not by conventions or social expectations, but by something much more powerful and enduring, the unconditional love and unwavering truth they had learned to value above all else. And as the sun set over New York City, casting its last golden rays through the apartment windows, that unconventional family celebrated not just the day's success, but the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. A journey of challenges and revelations, of courage and redemption, and above all of the simple but powerful truth that genuine love always finds a way, even when it seems impossible. The next morning, Valentina woke up early and found her mother already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. For a moment she watched her in silence, her hair carelessly tied in a bun, her skilled hands cutting fruit for a salad, her serene face of someone at peace with herself and the world. "Good morning, Mummy," she finally said, entering the kitchen and sitting on one of the high stools at the counter. "Good morning, my love," Eliza replied, leaning down to kiss the top of her daughter's head. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," Valentina affirmed, taking a piece of mango from the cutting board. "I was thinking about something." "What?" Eliza asked, intrigued by her daughter's contemplative tone. "You know what I liked most about yesterday? It wasn't the applause or the compliments from people," the girl revealed. "It was seeing you, Daddy, and Mrs. Joanna sitting together smiling at us like a real family." Eliza felt a lump in her throat. She put down the knife and sat next to her daughter, taking her small hands in hers. We are a real family, Val. Maybe not the conventional kind you see in commercials, but a real family, united by what truly matters: love, respect, and truth. Valentina nodded, her eyes revealing an understanding that went far beyond her 8 years. I know, Mummy. And I like our family exactly the way it is. At that moment, Victoria entered the kitchen, still in her pajamas and with her hair disheveled. What are you guys talking about? She asked, yawning. About our family, Valentina replied. And how special it is. Victoria smiled, joining them at the counter. We're like a constellation, remember? Each in our own place, but together we form something beautiful in the sky. Eliza hugged both her daughters, marveling at the wisdom and sensitivity they displayed. Of all the gifts life had given her, these two extraordinary little souls were, without a doubt, the most precious. And as the twins took an awkward and adorable bow for the enthusiastic audience, their identical smiles reflected not only the joy of the moment, but the deep peace of knowing that, no matter what the future held, they would always have each other and the strength of the truth as their guide.